Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Follow there. Ken Harrington is my name, and we're here this evening for Professor Christopher Moriarty, and you can see the topic tonight is the Dodder, history and natural history. A wonderful topic, a wonderful river. We all played in it as a child, went fishing as a child, and it's very much cleaner than it used to be when I was a child. Thanks be to God. Now, before I go any further, it'd be remiss of me if I didn't mention that just for a moment in our thoughts to keep in mind them two beautiful young women who lost their lives last week unfortunately, in the last couple of days in our city. And I find it so tragic for such an act to happen to two beautiful young women. And we even have a local connection here, as that Filipino girl attended Tala IT. I think this evening there's a little vigil being held in Enniskerry, and I'm sure the IT down the street from us here is planning its own little ceremony to mark the life of that beautiful young woman. In the meantime, our business tonight, housekeeping. If you turn your phones off, please. You take note of the exits behind us here or straight ahead of me, and away to our right hand side in the event of an emergency. And if anybody has any questions, you just hold on to them as you possibly can until the end, when the professor will be more than happy to answer all of your questions. In the meantime, take the floor, please.
Slightly from the professor. I was only a professor for 1 year. The more distinguished namesake, of course, was Conan Doyle's arch criminal and no relation. The Dodder. Begin at the beginning. Saturday, 14th of March 1936, number 4 at Farnham Park, which is very, very much within the Dodder Valley. I was a home birth. It was a critical day because the gynecologist had booked for a rugby international, and I believe I made it in. That's a nice 1930s house, and it was really part of quite an early development. There were 19th century houses a bit further down the Dodder. Then they moved out through that Farnham, and now what used to be a rural river in my young days has become very, very much a suburban one. So that was the beginning of me. This is the beginning of the Dodder, and the highest, it has 3 tributary streams on the mountains, and the highest point is on Kipure, and you can find it by a short walk if you walk up the access road to the TV mast. From this point, this is the point where the Dodder actually turns from a bit of permanent open water, turns from a swamp, a lot of quite wet peat bog, and into an open water stream. So that is the highest point on the Dodder. And I just draw your attention in particular to the fact that it is going through peat, and in water that flows through peat, there are 2 things about it. One, it extracts humic acids from the peat, and it has a very pleasant pale brown colour. Come back to that. The other thing is that in peat there is hardly any lime. Where there is hardly any lime, very, very few plants can grow. And that has a major influence not only on the natural history, but on the history of the Dodder. And I will be saying something about that. The main vegetation here is at the top of the picture, which is heather. And heather, one of the animals which can thrive on grazing heather is the red deer. The red deer was native to Ireland. The Dodder flows through Glenasmole, and you will find many stories about Finn and the Fianna. with relation to Glenasmole, and even the mountains are named after Finn. There is Sea Fin and Sea Fingan and Ballymore Fin are the mountains overlooking Glenasmole. According to the stories, Finn's headquarters was in the Hill of Allen near Kildare town, and you can see all of those mountains there from the Hill of Allen, and quite easy to imagine the deer going hunting in these mountains where there were very well-fed red deer. One of the interesting things about I must stop saying interesting things. Everything's interesting. Finn was practically all of the stories are about hunting and the joys of the woodland and all that sort of thing. I'm not aware of any mention of cattle. So Finn is probably telling us of a very, very ancient folk memory of the hunter-gatherers who were the early inhabitants of Ireland and who agriculture and cattle barons didn't come along until about 5,000 years ago. And with the ownership of cattle, then you have another great service where Cuchulainn. But I am diverting. The Dodder diverts, I divert. I am just going to show you pictures and waffle about them without any great coherence. As I told you, I was born in Rathfarnham Park, and I had a dog. There weren't many cars around, and a young child was quite safe to walk his dog by the riverside, and I did this very, very often. And it always had to be down the Dodder, because up the Dodder from where I lived, there was no easy access. There was a large green field which was firmly fenced off from the people, so you walked down the Dodder. And when I came around to writing a book about it, I decided that's what I would call it. And I just thought that book has been out of print for a while, but some people involved in the Dodder action, there are quite lots, as I said, a great many more people live by the Dodder than used to, and a great many more people are taking a very, very real and very, very serious interest in that river. And the Dodder action are one of the most active lot, and they published or led to publication of an online version of my book. So if you want to know more about the Dodder than I can fit in a talk this evening, you can, if you Google down the Dodder, you will get to it. And it was edited by an American academic who was here on a short visit for a few years, and who, like me, got carried away by the Dodder and its beauties. Here's a kingfisher, and there's a good story here. I was asked to give a talk to Alexandra College, which moved some time ago out from Earlsford Terrace. It moved down into the Dodder Valley. I was asked, would I give a talk on the Dodder, and the houses in Alexandra, or at least in the junior school, were all named after birds. So would I make a point of having a picture of a kingfisher? So I had never taken a picture of a kingfisher. It takes quite a lot of patience, quite a lot of skill. And so one day I went off to walk to the pond in Bushy Park to take a picture of a mallard, because I knew I could take a picture of a mallard. And coming towards me on a narrow path was a man with a large tripod on his shoulder. And I said, "You look like a man who might have a picture of a kingfisher." And he said, "I've dozens of pictures of kingfisher." And his name was Michael Finn, and I'm very happy to say he's here with us this evening. And he is a totally brilliant. He used to photograph people in weddings. Then he went into wildlife and has become a leading wildlife photographer and one of the very active people in the welfare of the River Dodder. The kingfisher is not. You find the kingfisher in the Dodder because kingfishers are fairly scarce birds because they need very specialised habitat. They need a smallish, small to medium-sized stream with low overhanging bushes so that they can perch on the bush and dive into the spot fish and dive into the water from there. And the fish that it is about to eat is a stickleback, which is one of the very, very few species of fish, of freshwater fish, native to Ireland. The trout and the salmon and the char, which nobody knows about, and the eel and the stickleback. Now, all of those fish species, can live in salt water. And no less a man than Geraldus Cambrensis actually had noticed that none of the absence of a lot of the fish he knew from Ireland, fish like roach and rudd, carp and things. And so 800 years ago, well, Geraldus wrote it down. I'm not sure that any Irish writer had much to say about it, but Geraldus wrote a very, very interesting work on the natural history of Ireland, but he can't have seen it all himself. And that's a very, very clear indication that the Irish people he had dealings with were very, very well clued up on nature. But Geraldus spotted the absence of any fish in freshwater except the few that could also live in salt water. And okay, I went from the start, and oh yes, I had a picture of the end of the Dodder, but I am now going to go to the middle. And this is Balrothery Weir, or Furhouse Weir, and it is close to us here in Tala, and but it's a strikingly beautiful little bit of the river, and it has lots of public access and footpaths beside it, and so on and so forth. And it is also absolutely seething in history. And I thought I would say a little bit about Clare L. Sweeney, and a book I would recommend to anyone. Anybody ever read Clare Sweeney or Rivers? Good. Very, very good. It is a very remarkable book, a very beautiful book, published in 1991 by Dublin Corporation, as it was then. And Sweeney was a great character, and he was employed by the corporation, and he wrote this wonderful book. And very happily, just a year ago, the book has been revised and published by Irish Academic Press. And the original one had colour printing was much dearer in the 1990s, so it didn't have any colour illustrations. But this new one has lots and lots of beautiful pictures, as well as everything, and edited by Gerard O'Connell and Michael Curtis, and very much available, strongly recommended. Why I particularly brought it in, well, they did use one colour in Sweeney's book, and as a result, it meant that his maps make it very easy to make some particular points. And there is Tala, and it didn't strike me until maybe today, or maybe, yes, I think this morning, when I suddenly got the idea of bringing this book in, that Tala was built not beside the Dodder, which, remember that monasteries need water and plenty of it, so I would think the great majority of Irish monasteries are built beside rivers. but the Tala, they didn't use the Dodder, and they built it on a ridge between the Poddle of the upper one and the Whitestown stream below it. So that is where Tala is, and the Dodder is a little way away from it. What this map shows very clearly, though, is a sorry, I keep forgetting that I am pointing. I'm looking at my screen and not at what you can see. But on the Dodder, you have the Balbrother Weir, and here you have an artificial canal. It had pretty well disappeared, but it joins the water to the Poddle. And why did it have to do that? Back to that one. The reason that it had to do that was that the Dodder flowed into the Liffey down here. The old city of Dublin was here, and so the Dodder was a long way. The Poddle was the water supply to the people of Dublin, who of course were all on the south bank of the Liffey there anyway. The Poddle provided them with enough water until the city grew, and the Poddle, there were also water mills on the Dodder, on the Poddle, and there simply wasn't enough water, so they decided there was a lot of water to spare in the Dodder. Nobody gave a damn about the Dodder going away to sea a long way from the city, and so they built the Balbrother Weir to tap the Dodder. And so they did. And that happened in the 13th century. And there's other little bits of history connected with that. In fact, the Poddle goes through Thomas Street. Thomas Street was named after St. Thomas's Priory. St. Thomas's, the religious order, was established by King Henry II, and the Thomas it celebrates is Thomas a Becket, who had been assassinated by order of the king just a few years before. And the priory was given land in the city of Dublin, but it looks as if that land went all the way out at least as far as Balbrother and maybe further. So the river Poddle and the water were the property of the monks of St. Thomas. And in the 13th century, near the middle, on the 29th of April 1244, Maurice Fitzgerald, Justiciar of Ireland, issued a writ commanding the Sheriff of Dublin, without delay, with the advice of the mayor and citizens, to make inquisition 12 free men as jurors as to the place from which would be best and most conveniently taken from its course and conducted to the King's city of Dublin for the benefit of the city and at the cost of the citizens. Nothing changed, does it? So originally there would have been an earth dam there. Early in the 19th century, Dublin had found other supplies of water, and the dam was derelict and probably highly dangerous, and it was rebuilt early in the 19th century, and that is the very beautiful stone-built structure that we have today. That was the middle. Going up, just a diversion on the going back to the headwaters. This is from Kipure, near the source of the Dodder. Hard to get to coincide both a really fine day and to get out there, and I haven't always succeeded in doing it, but a few points are visible. First of all, you have the two lakes of the Ornabrina reservoir. You also have in the distance, you have Dublin, and you have the lowlands anyway. In the Ice Age, which lasted over 1 million years and is probably still with us, I'm quite confident we're going to have there was a Ice Age cold snap in the 17th and 18th centuries, and one day, or for a few days, the Liffey actually froze over completely, and people had parties and skating and bonfires on it. We've been warming up since then. Nobody knows when the next one will come, so we may all be saved from global warming whether we like it or not. But if you look at in the background of the picture, you have the lowlands, the glaciers, or an ice field was flowing. Ice was flowing from north to south, all around the northern hemisphere. At the last of the 3 serious cold periods in the Ice Age, the ice went up to about a height of about 300 meters in particular on the Dublin Mountains. Further south you went, the thinner the ice would have been. Now, that low-level ground where Dublin is situated is underlain by limestone. This peat here, the underlying rock, is granite, which is acid and produces bog. Limestone has lime and produces a much greater variety of plants which grow much faster and are suitable for agriculture. And you can see vaguely on the right above the lake, you can see the pattern of fields with hedgerows, but on the highest bit of land there are no field boundaries. And that pattern, you will see it all over particularly the northern Dublin and northern Wicklow mountains. You see it all over the place. You will see the brown, the purple mountain tops, and below them green land with pasture. And that's all thanks to geology and climate change. But what it meant in history was that the Anglo-Norman invaders, cattle was the main source of their wealth, as it was the Celtic people before them. But they weren't interested in the highlands where you couldn't have cattle, and so they occupied the land up to that important 300-foot contour. And the locals were banished to the mountains and of course engaged in banditry on the grand scale, which not limited to Ireland. It's something you see between mountain people and lowland people, really, almost wherever it happens. And I make one more remark on the landscape. This pattern of hedges, which we love, nothing very ancient about it. That's an 18th century pattern of land use. Prior to that, the farming had been done mainly by commonage, and 18th century landlords took over the common land. They did create much more efficient agriculture. They did it by dividing the fields up, and originally by hedges. And that's reversing a bit. The hedges are, over the last 50 years or so, the hedges have been removed, and because agriculture does, I think mechanized agriculture does better with bigger fields. As I mentioned, up here you have, in the peaty land, you have peaty water. As it happens in the Glenasmole Valley, the bedrock actually is neither rich in lime nor particularly poor. But what's important about it is that the water flowing through it doesn't pick up any brown colour. Now, there was, just make one more point, the ice came up as high as you can see, and as the glaciers were melting, the ice actually formed a dam across the Glenismold Valley, and for probably 100 years or so, there was a huge lake filling the valley, very, very much bigger than anything there now. Early in the 19th century, engineers, Dublin was needing more water then. The corporation engineers looked at the Glenismold Valley and said it's not big enough. But then about 50 years later, the Rathmines and Rathgar township looked at it and they said there'd be quite enough water here for us, and so they prevailed on the corporation to produce a waterworks and a water supply, and that's what you have now. The earth, the dam is made of earth, or both of them, and if earth dams work very, very well indeed. This is an interesting, in this case it wasn't just a matter of filling a bit of the valley with earth. There were all sorts of springs and patches of gravel and things to make any dam insecure. So there's quite a network of concrete underneath the dam. If you walk along the lake, I would strongly recommend a walk to any people who haven't done it yet. There's a car park now a little way up the road from Old Bourne, and you can public access. Now, quite interesting that the lakes and the land around them are part of Dublin's fair city. They are not controlled by the county council, they are city, though they don't feel like it. This waterworks was created in the 1880s, and if you walk along the upper lake, you'll see on the side of the path there's another channel, and which is mostly open water. There are one or two places where they decided the slope of the land above it was too high, so they enclosed it, culverted it, and there are nice little stone bridges to do that. But the interesting thing about this channel is that this channel is the River Dodder.
Oh.
The lake which fills the valley of the Dodder isn't Dodder. In the nowadays, and for a long time, for 50 or 50 to 100 years past, you add alum to public water supply, and it flocculates the humic acid so that you can filter the brown material out, you can get it out. That hadn't been developed in the late 19th century. So what they did this is another important feature of the waterworks, and it's on, as you look downstream, it is to the left, and it's a channel, a twisting channel with high walls, and it is to carry the overflow water away from the upper lake in particular. Earth dams are wonderful. If by some horrible chance an earth dam on a lake gets overflowed at a very high flood, it can actually be carried away in a remarkably short time. So they built the dam high enough to take care of any flood, but they built the spillway so that rather than risk any water going over the dam, it's carried away to the left. They decided that, and they built the original spillway, that it would cater for a 100-year flood. There weren't all that many people, not so many people living in the Dodder Valley in those days. Anyway, but also the EU took a hand, and regulations were brought in that a 1 in 100 years was much too high a risk. If you had a large population downstream of the dam, you've got to cater for a possible 1 in 1,000-year flood. And so this spillway was rebuilt and done with very considerable sensitivity. It had been made, it was a beautiful thing of stonework rather than concrete, replaced by concrete walls, but they did take great care to not have just straight concrete slabs, but to mould the concrete so that it had some resemblance to the stone of the past. I hope everybody has read Hancock's History of Cala book. Strongly recommended. I think certainly in print recently, but probably still. Domville Hancock was a landowner here and a very, very local historian of the very highest order. And one of the things he wrote about was visiting the Carmelite Priory of St. Anne's. You are looking across the river, from across the lake in Poddle River, you can see the settlement of St. Anne's. There is quite a large graveyard and a church, a ruins church of the 17th century, but the foundation is very much older than that. The name of St. Anne's is quite amusing. It was the holy man who established the monastery in Celtic times was Saint Sanctum. He is not a very well-known saint, but he did that, and he presumably existed in some time over the ages. His name got translated in, and it now is. But Hancock, in the cemetery, you'll see this memorial to a number of people who they were monks, Carmelite community. They did many things. They set up a school and so on, but they also, according to Hancock, had great hospitality. And a little quote from him here: Maurice Collins was the leader of it. He served as prior until his death in 1865 at the age of 94. John Stewart subsequently became prior and died in 1887, aged 93. So, I mean, it is an enchanted valley. It's been an enchanted valley since the time of Philip, so not at all surprising that people lived into the 90s. William Hancock gives a first-hand account of the monastery and its devotees in the 1870s. And Hancock said, "A mile beyond Friarstown we come to the well-known monastery of St. Anne's. A few monks reside here who hospitably entertain all who come, provided they bring their provisions or order them beforehand. Here, during the summer, and sometimes in winter, a quoits club, so-called, meets occasionally. Several of its members are more famous for their musical, facetious, or gastronomic than for athletic achievement. The willing months supply room, fuel, and water, and many a pleasant evening is spent in the pure air of the mountains. It's a lovely picture of a 19th century institution. I'm now going to jump downstream to Rathfarnham and Rathfarnham Bridge, the Pierce Brothers Bridge on the main Rathfarnham Road. 17th century, Gerard Boat described the propensity of the Dodder for flooding, which of course has not yet left us. But he says, to go from Dublin to Rathfarnham, one passeth this river upon a wooden bridge, the which, although it be high and strong, nevertheless hath several times been quite broke and carried away through the violence of sudden floods. Although at other times, and when the brook doth only carry its ordinary water, a child of 5 years may easily and without danger wade, and a tall man on horseback riding underneath it, not being able to reach it. In the great floods the water many times riseth so high that it doth not only touch, but floweth quite over the bridge. It's really an interesting description. Of course, that was the flooding has been ameliorated to a great degree, but actually by the construction of the waterworks. And the main purpose of the upper lake is for drinking water. The main purpose of the lower lake is to collect flood water so that it can be released slowly. But anyway, so many bridges were carried away until until late in the 18th century, when the current one was built. Here it is, and a little point I would make here. You have granite here for the decorative work, and you also have granite for the sieve and for the string course, and the rest of the structure is of limestone. That is a use of stones that you would see very, very widely in Dublin, in walls and in buildings. Limestone, which is abundant and can be quarried in the lowlands, is easier to work as a building stone. You can cut it to sort of very, very smooth, flat surfaces. Granite is considerably harder, more attractive stone to look at, and granite is quarried in the mountains. There were granite quarries in the lower valley of the Feet of the Bastard then for a long time. And most granite comes from Wicklow rather from Dublin. But you will see the use of the two. This is the upstream side of the bridge. The bridge was widened in the 1950s. So the wider part is actually of concrete, but they copied the design of the downstream one, and even though it's a very much 20th century building, the quality is very high, and it's a most attractive bridge still.
Sorry, which bridge is it?
This is Rathfarnham, between Rathfarnham and Terranure.
Yeah.
Now, bridges are strategic things, and during World War II, I think the authorities probably felt that a German invasion up the Liffey was quite unlikely, but they might land other parts of the country, and they would then march on Germany. And so I had memories of seeing the army out with pneumatic drills. What they were doing was drilling small holes under the bridge. You will see them, it's not easy to get under that bridge, but you will see them under in Milltown. Various other places. Those are for explosive charges. Well, first of all, about the same time, they actually built concrete and steel barriers, which could be concrete barriers which could be joined by steel to prevent the advance of tanks moved by the road. But they also decided that they would be ready to blow up the bridge, and so impede the invading forces. It didn't happen. And then the bridge, when it was after its widening in the 1950s, it was renamed in honour of the Pierce brothers. St. Enda's School was a little way up the hills to the south of the Dodder. The GPO and also, of course, the headquarters of the Irish Republican Brotherhood and all were on the other side of the Dodder. So nobody knows how many times Pierce brothers must have crossed this particular bridge, probably cycling mostly, and of course they must have made their last journey to the GPO over this bridge, so it's a very, very appropriate place to commemorate. And just downstream of the bridge, if you pass on a sunny day, you will see on the road something between 1 and 5 people with camera tripods and cameras with large lenses. And what they have gathered to take a picture of foxes. This particular one is done with the work of Michael Finn with a fox and her cub. That's my one. The point of my one is that's taken with a telephone. I'll get back to the nicer one. But where this is very exciting is also appropriate talking to you this week. This is Biodiversity Week in case you don't know. And the importance of a river like the Dodder for biodiversity and for wildlife in general. But for a number of years now, either this fox or her ancestors have been living just above the water at the bottom of the Stokes and between the bridge and the first weir. They've been living there and certainly not frightened of people, and I think quite possibly actually enjoy watching people as a diversion. But some of the people who come and take their pictures throw food for them as well. But what strikes me more than anything is that when I was a lad, I wouldn't have done it myself, but quite a few of my contemporaries would certainly have thrown stones at any fox that was idiot enough to appear in a place like this. And it's really a very, very wonderful change amongst generations, the care being given to wildlife, to foxes. And foxes were given to you shot. And at the same otters, which again I have yet to see at Dodder otter. But all sorts of ordinary people do. People just out for casual walks now see otters. You never used to see otters. And up to, I think, probably about the 1960s or later, you could get a bounty if you brought in a dead otter to the fishery authorities. The otter has changed from being a pest into being a highly protected animal. And what is so exciting about the Dodder situation is that these animals, which still in most parts of the country are quite timid and avoid humans at all costs, they are now seen by people over and over again. Another jump to Rathfarnham Castle, which is looking quite recently painted and getting of the county council. Rathfarnham Castle was built at the end of the 16th century by a wonderful man. I'm sure some of you know Gilbert and Sullivan and the Mikado and the Pooh-Bah, who is Lord High everything and picks up jobs right, left and centre. The man who built Rathfarnham Castle would have put Pooh-Bah or any modern industrialist you like to dislike, put them all to shame. He got himself made Archbishop of Dublin, Lord Chancellor of Ireland, and finally Provost of the new Trinity College. They were just the major jobs, and he held them all at the same time and got paid for the lot. He built his castle here because we're just getting close to the edge of the Badlands, not long not far to the south of Rathfarnham. You're getting into the mountains and you're getting to the dispossessed. The Elizabethans were very, very worried about this, and so there was quite a lot of strategic sense in building castles to command crossing places of rivers, and that no doubt is why Rathfarnham Castle was built. But it's interesting, the people who built castles before that, they were very grim buildings with very small windows. They had nice big rooms, or sometimes big rooms, but they were very, very defensible. By the end of the 17th century, people were probably beginning to feel a bit more peaceful, and so they built spacious houses with plenty of rooms. But it's quite interesting if you look at that, at the building here. There are these turrets at each corner, and so of course there is the entrance, and so you have commanding from both sides of anywhere there was an entrance. So it's partly military building, but it was one of the early comfortable homes built in the country. And then down at the there was one gate which has mostly been destroyed in the village of Rathfarnham. In the late 18th century, when things were getting a great deal more peaceful, Henry Loftus, one of the descendants of Henry Loftus, the triumphal arch as a gate, and this is just in the Dodder Valley. A long time ago, my mother brought me to saw a woman who was sitting outside the castle, and my mother decided to go and talk to her. And she told my mother with great pride that she had 13 children and had reared them all in the gate. And after my daughter was published, I was delighted because I got a letter from Jerry Doyle, who had been there in 1916, and who explained to me that he was one of those children. He explained that the castle, the gate, it was the land between that and the castle then was all owned by the Lamb family, and it was a fruit farm, and the foreman of the fruit farm had the residence in the castle gate. It doesn't look up to much, but actually if you go close to it, you see the rooms would have been, but to put it mildly, a great deal bigger than the average worker's house. But also the windows are at each end, so it sort of looks as if it's a completely dark place, but actually it has large windows at the two sides. And some very lovely decorative work. It is quite a work of art. Go downstream, the Dublin to Dundrum Railway, built in 1846, and which survived as a railway until 1958, and it needed this viaduct to cross the Dodder. And luckily the viaduct was left. I have a strong suspicion that it would have cost so that the powers that be would have removed it happily, but it would have cost an awful lot of money, so they left it. Maybe they had higher thoughts, but I'm not sure. But anyway, it came out for to be a really precious part of the Lewis system. And beside it, you have the chimney of what was the Dublin laundry. Laundries, as well as they needed quite a lot of power. They needed water as well as steam, and so a lot of laundries were several situated by the Dodder in particular, and very often by other streams. Dublin Laundry has now been housing with a bit of park, but luckily the chimneys are now. These chimneys were very, very plentiful, and an awful lot were knocked down. Luckily, their sort of value as monuments to a past age has been recognised, and so now they're carefully preserved. This one also, and probably all of them, are also very important as an area for communications, and beloved of one or more cormorants. Cormorants, like they only nest on the islands like Lamb Bay, but they fly inland, and they like nice pools in rivers like the Dodder. They find a good lot of them. The evolution of the cormorant is something funny. They are water birds. They feed by pursuing fish underwater, but they don't have the right system for drying their feathers. And so you very common sight to see a cormorant hanging its wings out to dry. The majority of aquatic birds have a system which produces oil and keeps their feathers dry anyway. But for some reason, the cormorant didn't get that benefit. A less inspiring but very interesting monument, 1911. This is a vent pipe for a sewer which runs below the River Dodder in the valley, and which was completed in 1911. There are, I suppose, construction problems in putting anything under the river, but you do want your sewage to flow downstream in the direction of the sea, and so the river valley is the obvious place to put it, and so the sewer was put there along the Dodder Valley. There is continual work, lots and lots of, in the good old days, houses were built beside rivers because you could let your sewage go straight into the river and the river would take it away. This got overdone towards the end of the 19th century, and sewage systems were developed. But all of the local authorities are continually up against it because so many of these drains for private houses are underground, lots of them without any maps anyway, and so there's still more pollution than anybody is still getting into the Dodder. But then you compare that with the writings of Hancock, which make it clear that in the good old days of paper mills and things, the river was, the Dodder actually was sinking in places. So things improve, and the water, Dodder water, is in remarkably good shape considering the numbers of people who live in the valley. Quickly visit the Packhorse Bridge, I think probably 16th century, the oldest of the bridges. It's now just used as a footbridge, but quite interesting to think that until around the sort of 18th to 19th century, around that time, nearly all goods were moved on pack horses. You didn't who didn't have drays or carts to the same degree that you have now, and so by and large there was not much problem in crossing a river. But that was something that only developed seriously in the 19th century. And that's so the Dodder we just came to the 19th century. Donnybrook Fair, lovely tale is that of that, and there's a little. This is a rhyme. Donnybrook Fair, it was established by order of the King in 1204 and lasted until 1855. People had different opinions. Some people thought it was fabulous, others thought it was thoroughly immoral and a disgrace to the city. And there is a nice line, "'Tis there are dogs dancing and wild beasts a-prancing with neat bits of painting in red, yellow and gold, toss players and scramblers and showmen and gamblers, pickpockets in plenty both of young and old. There are brewers and bakers and jolly shoemakers, with butchers and porters and men who cut hair. There are mountebanks grinning while others are sinning to keep up the humours of Donnybrook Fair." Anyway, it all came to an end in 1844. And celebrated by the building of the church there. And also close to to Donnybrook Fair is this little obelisk, and has an almost meaningless inscription, but and it was to Alderman Morrison. And actually one of my readers wrote to me to tell me that Alderman Morrison owned Morrison's Hotel in Dawson Street. He provided the site for Donnybrook Church and kept up a long bitter feud with his neighbour Dr. Robert Percival in St. Anne's. Peace eventually ensued, and when Morrison died, Dr. Percival had the obelisk erected outside his own gate. It's a lovely story. I mentioned sewage. And really, to my mind, one of the most attractive buildings on the Dodder is the pumping station of 1881. The manager's house that's built up being still very, very carefully kept. But that pumping station was built to lift sewage from the lowland sewers and take them to the treatment plant at a higher level at Rings End. As you go down the Dodder, from London Bridge Road, you'll see across the river this little stone arch, and this is where the Swan River, which is mostly underground now, that flows through Rathmines, but it enters the Dodder here, and they put a plaque on the opposite bank celebrating that it was actually mentioned in Finnegan's Wake, for those who can understand it. And the Joyce's words were, shake hands with the thicket lock, sweet swan. And just a little further down, you have the Rings End Bridge. And again, we go back to Gerard Boat, who wrote in 1643, the time a stone bridge had been built over O'Dear. The slide isn't quite what it might be. But anyway, Boat's point was that a bridge was built and carried away, and rebuilt and carried away. Finally, one once built, and the Dodder upped and flowed around it and left it standing there. This one was finally put in 1803. The two maps, 1762 and 1816, show the contrast of the Dodder before it was enclosed with seawalls and as it is today. I don't know if the two map makers saw it in time. And finally, taking a look around the Dodder, and again how things have changed. St. Patrick's Church in Rings End has now been overtopped by an apartment block. But to where the cranes are, means to the left, was actually when I was writing the Dodder book, was still also almost derelict. That has made a really profound move forward from those days. So, over and leave you, and do strong recommendation to explore the Dodder water. Something very well worth preserving, and which is what is delightful, the number of people who have got seriously involved in taking care of it with a great deal of success. Thank you.
The monument, the Alderman there in Donnybrook, if you ever trapped in traffic there trying to negotiate out the monument, the little wording on it reads, as a man, few is equal, none surpass him. Little inscription on it, there. And as regards the close that railway line there that once ran out all the way to Bray from Harcourt Street, Todd Andrews closed it in 1958. I don't remember many political quotations, but he said on that day, nothing gives me greater pleasure than to close this last vestige of British imperialism in Ireland. It cost us $1 billion or something to reinstate that line out there, and thanks be to God they haven't collapsed the wonderful viaduct. The glass vision has completely changed in the last few years. I spent 34 years of my life working in that area, and that picture there would be alien to me. I can just about make out Ringsend Bridge, and if you're ever in Ringsend and you're crossing down Pearse Street, you come to Ringsend Bridge, they have a wonderful old tradition down there whereby anybody being buried in St Patrick's Church, that the coffin is taken from the hearse at South Lattice Road, and the coffin is then carried into St Patrick's Church. So if you're ever down there about 6:30 any evening, Monday to Friday, have a small bit of patience for the people. And as you cross the bridge, depending on the sunlight, you see the glint still beneath the ground as you cross over, looking at the bridge and the little hump on it, you still see the tram tracks as you cross over. Any questions? Any question again?
There was no wall there. I have friends that live along Stella Gardens, and there was no wall. And they had a flash flood, and them being in the dip, they were flooded up to about 6 feet and lost everything.
It was flooded several times. One, the first one I remember is Hurricane Charlie there. And then it was flooded about 2005, was it 2004? There was another great flood down there. And the result was this wall, which when you're walking in the area, it does take away from its former, there was a fabulous view out there all the time. That's the Sea Scouts building there just to the left. I think they're the first or second port Sea Scouts. Any questions?
Very deep, is it?
The Dodder?
The Dodder.
I don't think so.
Well, it strips out completely, almost completely there at low tide. This is high. This is done at one stage at high water, so there are plenty of mud banks between those walls.
And where the Dodder just runs down that bit and meets up with the River Liffey, and you also have the other waterway, which is the Grand Canal. But where the Dodder hits the Liffey, it would be called locally the Gut. The locals are referred to as the Gut. It's where you have the rowing clubs, etc.
And you have another rowing club just on the Liffey, where the Liffey meets it.
St Patrick's is there.
But there's a Ringsend regatta that I've never seen, and that's done by rowing boats. So it used to be the salmon boats which rowed to set their nets, and then the regatta seems to have developed from that. It's quite something.
Hello, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. Thank you very much. Donations at the back of the hall. And once again, folks, just wish you all slán